Hello, I'm Simon Calvert and I'm the Deputy Director of the Christian Institute. A year ago today, on the 13th of March 2024, Colin Hart, the Institute's founder and director, died suddenly of a heart attack. It was a huge loss to us all. I'd worked with Colin since 1996 and I still think of him all the time. It's hard to believe that he's not here with us anymore. But the Christian Institute, its staff, its supporters and its work are what Colin left behind. They are his legacy. When Colin began the Institute from his spare room here in Newcastle in 1990, he could never have dreamed it would become one of Europe's largest evangelical organisations dedicated to equipping Christians for the public square. All of that work is only possible by the grace of God and because of the people God has placed here. And those of us who are here all have stories to tell about how God used Colin to inspire us in our work, and also about knowing Colin as a friend. So I've asked some of my colleagues who've been here the longest to share some of their memories of Colin Hart.
I first met Colin about 25 years ago when I came to work at the Christian Institute. I worked with him for 14 years.
So I first met Colin in 2006. So what that had been 18 or so years that we largely worked together.
I've actually known Colin since he was a student, so we're going back quite a long way, and we were at the same church at that time. So at that time I remember Colin as being a very serious student, one who took church seriously and took his faith very seriously and took advantage of opportunities to explore it whenever he could.
I met Colin in 1996 after my husband Simon interviewed for a position here, and within just a very short time, one of the first things Colin did was he took us out for a meal, and that's when I sort of got to know Colin. But obviously through Simon's work I got to know Colin better over the years as well.
So I personally knew Colin for about 16 years, from early 2008. I have many memories of Colin, which stay with me. I think particularly his acts of personal kindness. I remember him visiting me when I broke my ankle, coming, trying to help me, seeing how he could make things easier so I could work at home and get around.
He would frequently travel to see his mother, whom he loved very much and loved spending time with, and really worked hard to kind of look after her.
Colin had a huge pastoral concern for the staff of the Institute, a love for them and for their families as well. When I started, it was already established that Colin would buy Christmas presents for the children of staff.
He would buy them a present at Christmas, usually a Christian book.
The Institute grew and the number of children grew, so there came a point where I think you had to draw a line, understandably. But it just said something about him that he would do that he would care for the staff and bless the staff in that way.
My husband and I knew Colin for many years before I started working for the Christian Institute. We were always very, very keen to support the issues that the Christian Institute supported, but we were also just grateful for the opportunity to know Colin as a brother in Christ.
He was a little bit more shy and reserved, but once you got to know Colin, he would come out of his shell a little bit more.
Colin himself did not like the limelight. He was quite sort of a shy, retiring and humble man, and it was never really about him. When I was head of communications here, it was all I could do to try and kind of encourage Colin to put himself forward a bit more. But I think that is testimony to his character as well, that it was never about him. He never wanted to be centre stage. It was the Christian Institute. It was Christ who should be.
The first time I met Colin again professionally was in this very room. This was his office. This is where I came for my interview. You can see how many books there are in this room. One of the things that Colin always stressed to us as a team was the need to read, be very well read. He built up the library, the many libraries actually here at the organisation, and so it was very fitting that after he passed away we renamed the research library as the Colin Hart Library in his memory.
He had this deep sense that unless the Lord builds the house, the workers work in vain. So he insisted on staff prayers every morning, and that was a profound act of expressing our dependence on God.
Colin was incredibly hardworking, very focused, very objective driven, and that could not fail to inspire you when you worked with him.
I actually went abroad with Colin. We went to the US. He kept forgetting that they drive on the different side of the road there in the US, so it was quite hair-raising to be in a car with him if he was behind the wheel. So I made sure I was the driver.
If we have an event here and we're doing some refreshments, we would often buy some biscuits, and I took to buying a certain sort of biscuit, but I think Colin decided that I was buying these because they were my absolute favourite biscuit and I wanted them on all occasions. So he took to just now and again sending me recipes. He would send me recipes for how to make things using these specific biscuits.
One memory was at a Christmas party. I think we were playing the game Empires, and you have to guess who in the room put that name in. And there was a name in there, Gertrude Himmelfarb, who was a Jewish historian. And I didn't think there was probably anybody else in the room who knew who Gertrude Himmelfarb was. And so it was quite easy to identify Colin as having been the source of that name, and therefore had him added to my empire.
I was friends with John Byrne as well, and John asked me to help him to plan a surprise birthday party for Colin's 60th birthday. And Colin really thought that, he let me know, he thought something was up. And he thought that he was probably going to be going out for a nice meal with a couple of close friends. But he opened the door and there's a circular table in front of him, and there's about 6 other people at the table, so it would seat 8 people. And he was amazed. Oh, hello, he's greeting the people on the table. And then he lifts his eyes up, and what he didn't realize is that the entire ballroom where we were all at was filled with friends of his from all over the country. Surprise! And his face just lit up, and it was like ripples of excitement as he looked at the next table and the next table, and then realized everyone was there for him.
I was there for that. That was a really nice occasion when we reflected on what he had achieved, or what the Lord had achieved through him, and perhaps more that could be achieved, obviously sadly cut short.
In the early years we were really working our socks off to get the Christian Institute set up, but there were a lot of hard things, but also a lot of laughs too. But it's a tough calling. So thank you for giving me all the encouragement that you have over the years. So thank you very much.
It was so nice as well, because obviously none of us knew, but in the Lord's providence, that we got to celebrate that with Colin prior to his passing unexpectedly in the March. So it's a wonderful memory.
In my own work, I would credit Colin very much with coming up with the main issue in the Ashers Baking Company case, the issue of compelled speech, an issue that was not well developed in English law at the time, but certainly one which, with Colin's involvement, got traction in that case and was ultimately the winning issue. I reminded him several years later that had been his idea. He didn't remember, and I think that's the mark of the man, his humility.
I remember at the time of the redefinition of marriage, he gave comment in person to committees at Westminster and was subject to verbal abuse.
2 of us were in front of a committee of MPs, and we were speaking about the importance of real marriage. And Colin received quite a lot of personal hostility from a number of those MPs who were clearly angry at his track record of campaigning on family issues.
And yet he answered graciously, didn't lose his temper with them.
And I sat there admiring the courage and self-control that meant that he was willing to receive hostility without in any sense expressing displeasure about it. It didn't worry him.
That was well to his credit. Give thanks to God for raising him up for that work.
He told the truth without fear, and I found that a tremendous example of courage.
I think the abiding thing that I will remember about Colin was his attention to detail, which could be infuriating at times.
In particular to him was the commitment to making sure that nothing that we ever said or produced or printed or anything like that should have any errors in it. He was very committed to that because truthfulness and integrity was very important if you bear the name of Christ in your organisation.
Colin recognised that he was answerable to God for how he ran the Christian Institute, and he wouldn't be put off by what other people would do or say or what they wouldn't do or say.
Colin would strive for excellence in everything. That included planning, pre-planning, having contingency plans, having backup plans to contingency plans.
Things were always done, and they were done well, and they were done with a minimum of mistakes.
And so obviously there were plans in place for if ever the director was incapacitated in any way, and they obviously swung into place when he passed away. Everyone knew what they needed to do because of planning, because of thinking ahead, and that's Colin.
When you think about Colin's legacy, it's a multifaceted thing, and you see it at different levels. You see it, the Coalition for Marriage, I think Colin would see as a huge part of his legacy.
The Christian Institute will be part of Colin's legacy, but I think much more than that, I think the people that Colin shaped will be his legacy.
His stand on the moral and cultural issues of the day will be a legacy, and waking up Christians to what is going on.
And some of the freedoms that we as Christians enjoy, particularly thinking of freedoms of churches to employ those who would hold faithfully to biblical sexual ethics. Those freedoms are really on the line, and had the Institute not been there, Colin's insistence to stand in the breach and to campaign strongly for the preservation of those freedoms, then we could have lost liberties that we really take for granted today.
It's remarkable what God has done through Colin.
I think we'll never know how great that impact was upon wider British society. What about the things that never happened that could have happened because of Colin's work in exposing issues and highlighting them? But certainly his impact on the people around him very much lives on. And I think the greatest tribute to Colin is that with his passing last year, the work has very much continued.
Without realising he would need to do it, he's left it in very able hands. And I think everyone that has those sort of leadership positions here are committed to that same standard of integrity and truthfulness and the rich biblical background of the Christian Institute. So.
Well, as you've seen and heard, Colin had a lasting impact on all of us under God. He did a great deal to shape us as Christian people, as well as shaping the work that we do here. We miss him, but we're so grateful to God for his life and his legacy. And I would just ask that you continue to pray for the ongoing work of the Christian Institute, and in particular that we would remain faithful to the biblical calling that Colin set out for us.